Hello and welcome. This is Joe Stakunis, President of Semi Americas, and I am here to start our webinar today. This is Semi's sixth webinar on CHIPS Act, and this has a bit of a different flavor, a very important flavor for our members. One of the requirements of CHIPS Act applications is to work with your local state economic development organization. And we are very pleased today to welcome the folks from GO-Biz in California, which is the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And with us today, to start things off, is Dee Myers, Senior Advisor to the Governor and Director of Governor Newsom's Office of Economic Development. I will turn things over to Dee to get us all started. Thank you, Dee.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you to Semi for co-sponsoring this webinar with GO-Biz, and thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. We know this is an important topic and something that people have a lot of questions about. As you all know, California has always been the beating heart of the semiconductor industry, starting with the first transistors in Silicon Valley. And our state is still home to the largest concentration of semiconductor companies in the country. From design to packaging, California plays a critical role across the entire supply chain. For example, we're the global leader in research and development, yet we're still a chip manufacturing force with over 600 fab facilities in the state, and we definitely want to see that number grow. Over the decades, we've built a great semiconductor ecosystem unlike anywhere else in the world, and I think the number of you joining the webinar today are just one more piece of evidence about that. We have a workforce of more than 63,000 people. There's certainly no other state and very few other countries that can match the breadth and depth of our talent and our innovation and our leadership in the sector. California businesses, all of you, will be critical to our efforts to accomplish our goals around the CHIP Act, which is, really building a larger, more resilient microchip supply chain, bringing the most sophisticated technologies back to the U.S. And ensuring long-term U.S. leadership in the sector and California leadership within the U.S. GO-Biz partnered with Semi today to hold this webinar so we could bring all of you together to discuss how we can support you, not only through the CHIPS Act funding process, but in your efforts to invest and grow in California more broadly. As Joe mentioned, GO-Biz is the state's economic development office. We're the leader for job growth, economic development more broadly, and business assistance efforts. So we offer incentive navigation and site selection services, labor market information, and local engagement and permit assistance. So a range of services, all of which we can leverage to help you build a more competitive CHIPS application. So please work with us on that. Our business investment services team has been leading the state's efforts so far on CHIPS, providing these services to semiconductor businesses of every scope and size, to meet the criteria outlined by the CHIPS program office. So again, please contact us as you consider your CHIPS proposal. Tell us what you're planning to do, share your progress, tell us what you need. As you develop that application, we're here to help. So again, really, we encourage you to reach out. We have several ongoing workforce development programs and both competitive and non-competitive financing programs that can help you meet the state and local support requirements set up by the CPO. So that's the CHIPS program office, by the way, which you all know. And in addition to our ongoing programming, like our Cal Competes tax credit and our R&D tax credit, the governor's 23-24 budget proposal includes additional provisions with CHIPS specific funding to provide additional state match for manufacturing incentive awardees. So again, looking for ways to support you. So again, we're thrilled that the CHIPS Act has created a great opportunity for California. We know we have an ecosystem here that's primed and ready to maximize that impact. So we look forward to working with you all to make sure we have the best set of applications possible. And again, please reach out to us. So with that, I want to hand the conversation over to Kaina Pereira, who leads our business development efforts. He's a senior advisor for business development, and a lot of you know him. He has been leading our nonstop engagement around CHIPS, so he's going to run through some relevant state programs and provide more information about our state's CHIPS efforts. So with that, over to you, Kaina.
Thank you so much, Dee, and welcome to our presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us. Obviously, a big thank you to Joe and the team over at Semi for providing us the platform to engage with the multitude of companies that are in our ecosystem. Since the CHIPS Act was signed into law, we've been actively, one, trying to understand the provisions of the law and the requirements that are asked of the state. And in doing so, we recognize that a lot of the services that we provide currently align very well with the requirements that are stipulated within their guidebooks and their information exchange. So one of the main things that I want to step back on is that Joe, in talking to Semi on a specific engagement earlier, mentioned that in surveying the community or the ecosystem itself, that many of you have never engaged with the state, local, or even the federal grant program ever. And so I'm going to step back a little bit and to give a bigger understanding of the services that my teams provide. And the main team that would be engaged in these types of efforts is the GO-Biz team, our California Business Investment Services team. This team focuses on site selection and incentive navigation, and also assists in identification of tax credits and incentives that are available to all companies, regardless of the CHIPS Act orientation. And I mention this because our services are available to you regardless of this federal effort. And we want to make sure that you have a way to engage with us should any of these desires or impetuses create the opportunity for expansion or growth in California. All of these services are free. All of these services are already available to any company looking to make California their home, looking to expand their existing operations, or potentially seeking alternative locations for growth. In this case, we have a team of representatives across the state who provide tailored site selection and incentive navigation services dependent on the project orientation. It's not a corporate grant or a corporate program. These are project-specific investments. And so what we look at are the project's veracity to create jobs. And obviously in California, we take a fine look at how those jobs and what those jobs are. Where they are located is another big portion of how we determine optimal investments for California. So with that, here's a list of some of the incentive programs that are available to all companies. And this is very much so specific to any type of project, but in going into the CHIPS Act more specifically, these would be what would be considered the covered incentive classifications once awarded. This is where California has a slightly different format than some of the other states in that most of our programs require an application, have application windows, and have award periods, which must be adjudicated in order to be applied to the full-on application. However, during this time period of understanding what the requirements of the application, the CPO has allowed for provisions of potential incentives that could be awarded at a later date. In which case, we will work directly with companies to identify those potential incentives, the amounts that could be appropriated by those specific programs, and how to include that information into your application. The main program that our office offers is the California Competes Tax Credit. This tax credit is an ask of the company to our shop in terms of how much credit you need to make the business decision to either expand or come to California. In this case, it's based on a multi-factor review, one of which is the location of which these investments are going to happen. Are they happening in high poverty or high unemployment areas? In which case, those get a slightly better score. Secondarily, it's based on the job creation and the investment capital included in the project. And so you take the job creation factor and the investment factor and divide that by your ask, and that's how we get what is essentially a score to pre-grade all of the applications in the application timeframe. After that, there's a determination of whether or not this decision is, or whether or not this credit would be instrumental in making the final business case decision. So in other words, does the credit create the decision for the company to place these new jobs and this new project in California? Should those check all the boxes, it would then go into a competitive scoring round in which the best applicants would receive a qualified tax credit. In the 23-24 budget cycle, we have a proposal to extend the CalCompetes grant program, similar in the tax credit in most of the mechanics, while different in that it is a grant allocation versus a tax credit allocation. We're hopeful that we're able to get that passed within this term and to provide that with specific CHIPS or with specific language appropriate for the CHIPS Act in particular. A second program that is based on the very similar but-for case of but for this investment or this incentive, the decision to be placed in California would not happen, is our economic development rate, which is offered by our investor-owned utilities. These rates are reduction on the utility coverage or the energy produced or energy costs at a specific location or locations as covered by this economic development rate. PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric all have statutory programs, in addition to some of the municipalities who may have them. I believe SMUD has one in the Sacramento territory, and there's a few others that may have. Those are reviewed by our office, the judge based on the veracity of the project and the but-for case, and offered to companies across the landscape. The general reduction in costs on the economic development rate is around 12%. The next segment of incentives are ones that most of you, if not all of you, should be taking advantage of in some or in part. The first is the research and development tax credit. This is probably the most instrumental tax credit and program that California offers. It is very much so close and mirroring the federal tax credit program and is considered a covered incentive. These valuations are taken on your tax return at the time of filing your taxes and can be readily included in your application as state match. I will note that we have put in a request to the CHIPS program office to review the R&D tax credit for allocations that could span multiple years on product creation that could increase the amount of tax credits associated with the applications, knowing full well that research and development takes time. We're hoping that the CPO looks at our understanding of research and development in a favorable way, thereby plussing up all applications in California. The next one is the partial sales and use tax exemption. This is available to manufacturers making critical purchases of equipment related to their manufacturing process or related to their manufacturing efforts. This partial sales and use tax exemption is roughly 3.9% and can be taken at the time of sale or at the time of purchase. There is a program available from our California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, CDTFA, called the Get It in Writing program, in which you can submit your potential purchases to understand which would qualify for this reduction or this exemption. They are available in writing, and you are able to process those things on a daily basis. You can even check on previous purchases that may be qualifiable. If you potentially have a purchase in the past that you believe may qualify, please email or contact us. You can email us at calbiz@gobiz.ca.gov, which is CALBIS, at GOBIZ.ca.gov. And we'll look into that inquiry and see if there's potential exemption available. These exemptions are also considered covered incentives in the case of past purchases that could be applicable to your application and potentially used on future research and development criteria. The next program is a full sales and use tax exclusion with a very funky acronym, CATFA. The California Alternative Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority, underneath the State Treasurer's Office, provides a full sales and use tax exclusion. However, this program is capped at a $100 million allocation, essentially equating to roughly $1 billion or $10 billion in sales. However, the application timeframe starts in the January window, and this current allocation is basically full. In preparation for future applications and in preparation for future rounds of the CHIPS Act, which we know that the funding for this particular program lasts further than this initial year, and as much as 5 years, this exemption should be explored for potential sequential manufacturing purchases in future applications. And as such, an additional $100 million allocation will be available in the January time period. In preparation for this, we will begin working with clients on their applications and pre-application information roughly 2 to 3 months prior to the opening of the cycle. You want to get in the queue so that way they understand what the project is, so that way they have a better chance of funding it. There are certain provisions to this application, and there is a fee associated with the application as well. But the reduction obviously takes you from that 3.9 roughly % in the partial to whatever the full impact of sales and use tax is within your jurisdiction. Next, and a critical component to a lot of the operations and applications that they're expecting to see from the CHIPS program office are related to employment training and hiring. A number of different programs are currently available to companies, and we hope that you are using some of them in some respect. But one in particular that we want to point out is the Employment Training Panel. The Employment Training Panel offers a dollar-for-dollar reimbursement for training done either offsite or on the job, depending on how the contract is formed, but for the workers that you have in place and for the new hires that you're going to bring in for this project or for these projects. In this case, the reduction or the rebate, if you will, for that training time is up to 200 hours per employee per year. And that equates to roughly, it's capped at the low end of 150% of unemployment wage, or sorry, of minimum wage to 350% of minimum wage. And then that's the range of the reimbursement. So depending on what the wages that you pay your workers, your reimbursement could be 100% of the time that they're doing their training, depending on what those rates are. The Employment Training Panel offers a critical proposal designation, which is conferred upon by the GO-Biz office, which allows for a raising of the cap or an acceleration of the timing for the execution of the contract. In certain cases, we may feel as though there's an impetus for acceleration of the project because of its impact to its general vicinity or the territory that it serves. In those cases, you can work directly with our office on trying to obtain such favorable designation. In the next two segments are more specific types of hiring credits that are aimed at some of our more disadvantaged populations. One specifically is the homeless hiring tax credit, which, as it states, is a tax credit designed to induce companies who are interested in hiring people who have been formerly homeless and trying to obtain a better quality of life. Additionally, the new employment credit falls along the similar lines in that it's currently designed around designated geographical areas that are high poverty and high unemployment, or specific classifications such as veterans, previously incarcerated, previously unemployed. In that case, these credits last based on the creation of the job and the duration at which that person maintains that employment. These credits have been in place for a number of years, but we have in this next budget cycle offered up another potential adjustment to the new employment credit, eliminating the designated geographical area for specific applications related to CHIPS Act companies. This would remove the restriction of the designated geographical area for high poverty and high unemployment for those potential tax credit seekers. In this case, we're hopeful that this is obviously included in this year's budget, and should more information become available around that, we will definitely disseminate it out through this group and to all of you. The final segment is mostly on financing. These are different opportunities that are available through our partners in the State Treasurer's Office or in the Infrastructure Bank. The Infrastructure Bank of California is our economic development bank. They provide services related to the Industrial Development Bond, which is a bond specifically for the expansion of manufacturing. It is currently capped at a project allocation, so your project scope can be no larger than $20 million. And the amount of the bond can be no larger than $10 million. For some of the smaller expansion type opportunities, this could be a very reasonable way to vary out some of the cash flow issues related to purchasing this equipment or related to doing extended expansions. Should anybody be interested, obviously we will connect you directly with our iBank representatives. And again, At any time, if you would like to get in contact with our shop or our office, you can email us at calbis@gobiz.ca.gov. Secondarily to that, we have the Small Business Loan Guarantee Program, which offers guarantees, I believe, up to $2 million on loans that would be provided for working capital or any of the other types of efforts that may be involved in your operations. These are very somewhat flexible, done through CDFIs, and you may have taken advantage of some of these small business loans or loan guarantees in the past. Again, if you're looking for specific financing opportunities, we'd be happy to connect you with some of those resources. Finally, there's the California Pollution Control Financing Authority and CalCap. We love our acronyms here. Often they are more difficult to understand and to connect with than the people. And so I highly encourage you in all cases, if you are interested in any of these programs or any of these opportunities or site selection services or getting a better understanding or connection with your state officers and assistance points, please again, email us at calbis@gobiz.ca.gov. Michael, next slide, please. Thank you so much. So we've gone through a lot of the services and a lot of the programs that are available, but I think the most important and most critical thing that I could state in this entire webinar is engagement is going to be needed. Whether it's related to your CHIPS Act application or related to getting a better understanding of the services that are available to all companies in California, we highly encourage you to visit our website, which is business.ca.gov, and more specifically, the CHIPS resource pages, which is business.ca.gov/industries/CHIPS. There you can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up for and track related updates as the new phases of applications come out, and as we get specific direction from the CHIPS program office related to some of the inquiries that we've put in thus far. We will be providing those updates as well as links to the necessary information on our CHIPS resource page. We would encourage you highly to share your letter of intent, should you've already prepared one, or your proposal plans with us, so that way, one, we can meet the most critical requirement for state agencies and state engagement, which is support on your application, either through incentives or through the provision of the letter of support. We will also be able to connect you with your local economic development organizations who may have local resources and programs, or your local educational institutes, including community college systems, the UCs, the CSUs, and private universities, depending on what the workforce plan or development opportunities you see as related to your application. In addition, we'll work with the workforce development boards, any community-based organizations, and other state agencies to provide the relevant information to your application. This is inclusive of the next partner that will be presenting on our labor side, who has been working with us in developing some critical information related to labor concentration within the designated NAICS classifications, or in the North American Industry Classification System codes, identifying these specific job skills and job requirements that are needed for the types of investments that you guys are doing. And so with that, I'd like to offer up additional information on the next page, which is a fairly busy slide, but next slide, please. Again, just reiterating the fact that we have the main resource page, which is business.ca.gov/industries/CHIPS. There you will also find an additional summary of these incentives via a one-pager, which is very much so, is a very brief understanding of each of these programs that were outlined today. Additional information is available in terms of community data. You want to know more about where your area is, how it sits, who the community partners are, you can visit business.ca.gov/community data. And for a full litany of all the incentive programs available, of which we've covered maybe a third. There is the business comeback guide, which is business.ca.gov. I'm not reading that whole thing, but that is basically an illustration of all the different programs that are available to any company, depending on what their project orientation is. Again, what we encourage you to do is to reach out to us. And that is CalBiz, CALBIS, at gobiz.ca.gov. I know I've given a lot of information, and thankfully this is being recorded. I will just reiterate the email address one more time, calbis@gobiz.ca.gov. I was told in the past that you have to repeat something 3 times at least, or it will not get remembered. But thankfully this is being recorded as well. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to Derek Kirk.
Thanks, Kinda. Good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Kirk. I am the Assistant Deputy Secretary of Climate at the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. We're excited about the opportunity to work with GO-Biz in support of all of you as you consider applying for support from the CHIPS and Science Act. We're particularly excited because of the way in which the federal government has framed this funding opportunity. And I would just want to pause and highlight a couple of things directly from the information that they have put out. And that is that 2 of the core objectives of the CHIPS Act are 1, building a skilled and diverse workforce, and 2, driving economic opportunity and inclusive economic growth. If you haven't had the chance yet to work with the state of California, and particularly the Newsom administration, the work that GO-Biz and that the labor agency are doing in partnership together is really trying to drive towards those 2 core objectives in everything that we're doing. And so we're excited that I'm excited that the federal government is leaning into those opportunities as well, because it presents some real interesting opportunities for program alignment and partnership. We know that as we're looking at a vision for workforce development in this program, that the federal government has also noted that delivering on national and economic security objectives demands major investment into the semiconductor workforce. And most importantly, investments that will support good paying jobs across the entirety of the industry. And we also know that that can't happen in silos. I think the federal government, through the program information that they have put out, has done a great job emphasizing the reality that workforce development can't happen behind a closed door. Workforce development cannot happen with 1 singular partner or even 2. It really requires a network of stakeholders coming together to identify opportunities for future collaboration. So as we think about workforce development opportunities, I'm going to use the CHIPS and Science Act language rather than the language that we use here at the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. It's really a matter of a difference in verbiage, not a difference in intent, but I want to make sure that we're staying aligned with what the CHIPS and Science Act programs are requiring. So they're really considering a couple of core notions that I'm going to highlight, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that you may be able to take advantage of through the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. So 3 things. 1, the CHIPS program office is wanting to ensure that as you're making investments into workforce development and considering investments with partners, that you're employing a whole of society approach, bringing together government, employers, training providers, workforce and economic development organizations, community-based organizations, education and training institutions, labor unions, and more. A really robust partnership. All of those partners are absolutely necessary to ensure that we're building effective collaborations and considering the needs of workers, not just from the training perspective, but really from the whole person perspective. The second kind of piece here is that as we look to build a skilled and diverse workforce, we want to work with partners to ensure that there are people that can construct and then operate the facilities. These investments are really targeted, again, back to those core objectives of building a skilled and diverse workforce and driving economic opportunity. And so really that kind of core collaboration there. And then this piece of developing plans that best meet the needs of your workforce, the region that you're anticipating, that you're either in or anticipating being in, and your specific project. We recognize here at the Labor Agency and in partnership with GO-Biz that it takes industry and workers working together to ensure that we're building those partnerships that drive towards real economic impact and inclusive economic growth, ultimately so that we can create a California for all here in the Golden State. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the programs, just really high level for you. Kind of already mentioned the Employment Training Panel, which is a department under the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Most importantly, and I'll just reiterate some notes here, that there's really two approaches that you can engage with the Employment Training Panel on. One of those approaches is as a single employer, and this is really meant for what I would call larger employers that are considering a larger impact, that will be kind of hiring in mass, if you will, into your facility, where you can partner with the Employment Training Panel and your workers to develop a training curriculum that's really guided by you as a company. And you really get to consider all of those kind of core components that you need as a single employer. For the smaller companies or those that might be looking to hire in smaller numbers, the Employment Training Panel has what are known as multiple employer contracts, or MECs is what you'll often hear them referred to in the space. These are often third parties like community colleges. There are some chambers of commerce or economic development organizations across the state that step up and take on the administrative responsibility for companies, help companies build the training curriculum collectively, and ultimately serve as kind of a right arm in the process to make sure that you're not overtaxed in any sort of way from a capacity perspective. We're really excited about the work that ETP can do with all of you in terms of new hire opportunities and ultimately supporting you in job creation across California. We also, at the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, have a department known as the California Workforce Development Board. It's again a statewide board that connects to the network that kind of was talking about of regional and sub-regional workforce development boards across the state. The Workforce Development Board is responsible for managing what we call our High Road Training Partnerships program. And it's a really unique program that's intended to bring stakeholders together from workers to labor unions to economic development organizations, employers, community members, and community leaders to really identify some core opportunities to develop the training curriculum and career pathways that are best suited for the workforce and for all of you in this industry and in your particular region. One thing that I want to note is that if you saw the CHIPS for America Workforce Development Planning Guide webinar recently, they had a slide on there that highlighted how to build strong partnerships. And the right organizations that they highlighted were business and industry leaders, educational institutions, workforce boards, labor unions, economic development organizations, CBOs, and even affordable housing providers. Many, if not all of those organizations are tied in when we make High Road Training Partnership grant opportunities through the Workforce Development Board. And so I would highly encourage you, I'll put a link in the chat as soon as I'm done. There's actually a session happening today at 1 o'clock, another webinar that the Workforce Development Board is hosting, talking about the intricacies and the application details of the High Road Training Partnership Program, and a really interesting opportunity for collaboration for many of you to consider. And then lastly, I'll just note the Division of Apprenticeship Standards really is housed under the Department of Industrial Relations, again, through the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. They have a core mission of supporting in the development of apprenticeship opportunities across the state. The governor has set a goal of 500,000 apprentices in California by 2029, and we are looking at really a variety of opportunities to support apprenticeship in the building and construction trades, which hopefully many of those apprentices will help to build the facilities that you all are investing in here in California, but also looking at innovative models for apprenticeships. And the department or the Division of Apprenticeship Standards has a long history of working with both the ETP and the Workforce Development Board to make sure that as those two departments are making investments into the workers that you all will be hiring, that we're considering really the structure of career pathways and apprenticeship opportunities for those workers. So I'll wrap by just saying that our team here at the Labor Agency and our departments are excited about the opportunity to work with all of you. We are going to work in lockstep with GO-Biz and specifically the California Business Investment Services team, as they serve as the business development concierge to all of you. They know when and how to raise a flag and engage us. And we are deeply committed to ensuring that we are supporting all of you in attracting the federal resources and helping us to create high quality job opportunities here in the state of California. Thanks so much. And again, I'll put some links in the chat for all of you as soon as I wrap.
Thank you, Derek. I just want to kind of pick up where Derek left off and speak to some of the data that we can provide around your workforce assessment and to really inform some of these partners that you bring to your tables to develop out your proposals and your plans. So first, I just want to navigate you some of the resources that we mentioned. On our business.ca.gov page, that's where we have these industry pages. If you navigate to the semiconductor page, that's where you can find a form, some information on the CHIPS Act, a form to contact us. So you can use that CalBiz email, calbiz@gobiz.ca.gov, or alternatively contact us this way. Separately, this is where we can provide news and updates. So this is where you can register for our semiconductor mailing list so this way we can disseminate information out to you. And then once again, another form to contact us. Outside of putting some of the federal solicitations and information that comes out, on this page, we provide California specific business and workforce data. So if you go under the semiconductor data, and this data was provided by our Employment Development Department under the Labor Market Information Division using both federal and state data, there are a number of Excel sheets that break down both regional and state business and talent data. For the purpose of just today and timing-wise, so we can get to the questions and answers that are coming up, I just want to touch on this talent and training data. I encourage you to explore the other sheets. And also on this drop down, you'll find a semiconductor data guide that you can use to help navigate these resources and understand how to leverage them for an application. But focusing on just the talent and training data, that'll open this type of Excel sheet. So on this sheet, you'll have your intro slide, which is an opening describing the type of data here. Each tab at the bottom provides a different lens into thinking about your talent pipelines in your region and in California. So stepping through very quickly, what this SOC to SIP. So really what this does is track your occupation code and the programs that feed those occupations. So we've created a list of occupations that are the top occupations in the semiconductor industry. So of course we have our managers, but as you can scroll down this list, there are a number of occupations that feed the semiconductor industry. So as you're thinking about your proposal plan and you're thinking about the types of occupations that you know that you'll need to fill to expand or grow, this can be a really good way to inform what type of programs feed your occupation. Separately, there also we have top titles. So once again, it's a crosswalk from occupation to the taxonomy of programs, which our California community colleges use to track programming inside of the state. So separately, outside of that sheet, I want to point you to this detailed completer data sheet. What this does is provide a regional breakdown of information to understand what your program completers in your region look like. So once again, this is broken down by occupation and the program that feeds the occupation. Separately, you can see, for instance, I'll scroll down here. So let's say, just an example of how maybe you might use this data. If you're a business in LA, you're thinking about a CHIPS proposal, and you know that for your business, you will need electromechanical and mechatronic technologists. So this occupation code 173024. What this data provides is it tells you the programs that feed into that occupation, the program title here, and different amount of program completers and where they are completing that program. So in LA, if we look at this profession or this program, we can see that these universities or these community colleges are offering associate's degrees to feed that occupation. So this data can be utilized to really think about who you're bringing to the table. If you know that you need a certain occupation, find your occupation, locate your regional planning unit. And once again, your regional planning unit, you can locate that information about which one you would belong to on that intro slide. It'll direct you to a link to actually locate your regional planning unit. And then separately, that semiconductor data guide available where all the data will be can tell you how to actually locate your region. So moving through, once again, if you know that you're looking for these program titles, you can find your award level and then see your top graduating institutions in your region. Lastly, the rest of the data kind of breaks this down in different ways, but same thing, you can look at program titles, total completers for every year, and start to do that assessment and think about what the build up or build out might be to meet your plans. And then lastly, we have a slide that shows the top program completers. So for each program title, what institutions in California are graduating the total most amount of completers and what type of award are they certifying. Lastly, I want to jump back to some other resources here. We talked about the one pager and some other resources. If you navigate over to our About page, you'll see a Publications tab. If you scroll down, you'll find the California Business Investment Services Unit, CalBiz, and that's where you can find that the one pagers, you can find data tools, that larger business comeback guide to explore other incentives that exist in California. Lastly, on the page, we have a navigation to our community and place-based solutions data tool. I want to quickly just touch on some of the data that's available here and once again, how it can be used. So this tool lets you select all the cities in California. You can select a county, you can select a larger region, or even California as a whole. So just for a quick demonstration, I'll pick on San Diego. So if we go to San Diego, you can find a summary page here. So let's say I select down and select San Diego. What this map will do is explore the county. You'll have a summary page just understanding what your local demographics look like, what the population is, different levels of educational attainment, basically an overall summary of what that region can look like. Outside of the pre-selected cities and counties and regions, you can also create a user-defined area using this feature where you can actually define a certain city or boundary. Separately, how this data tool can really be used is you can look at talent data. So switching over from summary slide to talent, we can create a talent report inside of your region and explore, once again, the top programs and institutions in your region or within a radius. And once again, you can tune the size of this radius to understand who is graduating the top programs in certain program taxonomies. So for instance, if you knew you were in need of engineers, you can explore through, let's say, chemical engineering, and you can see what university nearby is graduating and at what level are those graduates. So we can see total graduates, associates, bachelors through PhD level. I also want to point out to our business tab. So outside of talent, once again, this kind of pluses up that Excel sheet I just showed. You can move over to the business tab, and here you can explore what your business ecosystem looks like. So this is basically almost a yellow pages of businesses. And clearly this is very populated right now because it's showing all businesses in San Diego. I do want to caveat with this data that it is robust and it is some of the best out there for really this type of granular level, but it will not be a 100% complete data set. It is a great resource, data axle. However, just keep that in mind. And this is really good for understanding your swath of business community, rather than getting very, very granular single business data. So inside of this data report, there's some unique features to once again quantify and understand your business environment. There are specific clusters, so you could select the semiconductor microelectronic cluster to understand what that business environment may look like. And this is streamed through a set of NAICS codes that really encompasses the industry. Separately, you could manually enter a NAICS code. So for instance, if you were to enter the semiconductor, the electronic manufacturing NAICS code, you could see basically a list of businesses inside of that region that fall in that NAICS code. So in this manufacturing category, you can actually break it down and see the different types of more specific 6-digit NAICS code inside of that 5-digit NAICS code and see your businesses. You could toggle them on and off to see which exist basically in your business community to understand partnerships, potentially consortia formations, understand talent pipelines, and and is a really good basically networking and way to quantify what your ecosystem looks like. Separately, if you were to select one of these specific NAICS codes, you can actually pull up a list of businesses, their total sales, employees. And once again, I want to highlight this is broad data. There might be some discrepancies about where headquarters are versus where an actual plant is, but once again, really can help you understand what your ecosystem looks like. I appreciate that time. Once again, I'll highlight, if you have any questions, feel free to go to our resource page, business.ca.gov/industries, or navigate it through this way. And then here you can find the contact us button, and please send any of these thoughts, questions, ideas towards us, and we're happy to discuss. With that, I'd love to open up for the question and answer and direct some of these questions over at Kaina. I encourage everyone to keep adding questions into the chat too in this last 15 minutes, and Kaina will get to as many as you can.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to reiterate something that Michael pointed out. You know, in presenting all of this information and data, we're looking at snapshots in time. If in exploring that information, you see a gap that could be facilitated by either our education partners, our labor agency, or us to help close that gap, let's talk about it, because there are programs spinning up where we're looking at career technical education requirements and the needs of some of the downstream participants and trying to design new workforce programs around that. So should you find a specific area of need, please reach out to us so we can help develop what that need could look like in the workforce infrastructure landscape. I'm ready to take any questions we have.
Sure, Kaina, I'll start with the first question. Should a letter of intent to apply for CHIPS Act funding be addressed directly to GO-Biz?
No, the letter of intent should be addressed to the CHIPS program office as indicated in their information. We would like to receive a copy of it, one, to make sure that we understand that this application is intended to be filled out, and so we can help provide direct support for your application, including any incentives that could be available to the project.
Is there funding available in the CHIPS Act for the creators, providers of important electronic design automation software? This is foundational for designers of IP, semiconductor chip foundries, assembly, etc. I didn't see specific allocation mentioned in the CHIPS Act for our EDA industry. Would appreciate guidance.
Yeah, it is our understanding that EDA related functions will fall under phase 3. Phase 3 is more specific to research and development types of endeavors related to semiconductors and microelectronics. It is potentially possible that it could be in round 2, which is more materials and equipment, but it is, from our understanding, because of where the use case is on that specific type of product set, that the likely phase for expected interest would be phase 3, which is expected sometime in the fall period. I would actually confer with Joe and see if he has anything else to offer on that, or if I'm completely off base, but I think that's correct.
Kind of, that is correct. And it is very encouraged by the CHIPS office. There's a real interest in design. It's viewed as one of the true areas for innovation. And I do think you'll see support for it. But again, my understanding is 2 or 3 as well.
Appreciate that validation there, Joe. Thank you.
And I want to ask a question and expand on it here. Will California be doing anything to accelerate the CEQA review process? I'd like to expand that to give you an opportunity to chat about how businesses can interact with their local governments and the types of support, what that support could look like.
Yeah, not getting in front of the administration on CEQA, I would say that our office in particular is interested in any types of opportunities that would increase the investment quotient and capacity for California companies. That is a very generic response. I understand that. I will say, though, that in reference to specific permitting related functions as outlined by the CHIPS program office in relation to the CHIPS Act, we have been directed as a state to do everything we can in shoring up the transparency and timing of permit related functions. And as such, we'll work with your local communities in making sure that they have a good understanding of what the project's scope is, whether the potential implications could rise in terms of review of those processes, and would in general be supportive of specific actions that accelerate the timeframes inclusive of CEQA. We have had conversations in the past with specific jurisdictions who were interested in proposing CEQA reform in relation to CHIPS Act applicants. And at this point, we have not seen those bills come to fruition. However, we could be supportive of some indications, especially if that increases the ability for us to cite large fabricators or those types of constructions that are necessary within the timeframes of the CPO. So yes, we are interested in seeing what the art of the possible is there. In most cases, these will be project-specific types of actions, most likely. And at this point, we're not seeing the need necessarily for a statewide program related to that potential exemption. Hopefully that answers clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaina. There are a number of questions on the Cal Competes program, some more specifics on what types of semi-businesses have received that in the past and what those awards look like. Give some more
Okay.
details.
Under the previous grant program, there were a couple of awards. I believe one was applied, one was Lamb Research. Those were both in preparation for their CHIPS Act application, and I believe the awards were in the multi-millions of dollars. I can definitely get back to you with specific information on the amounts. If you want to see the awards, they're all publicly available. So since you're on our business.ca.gov, you can go to advantages and then incentives and credits and then Cal Competes, and there'll be a tax credit award list and as well a grant award list on the Cal Competes page. We can provide that link in a follow-up as well. There have been previous tax credits associated with non-CHIPS Act applications. They have been just based on the strategic expansions and opportunities for additional job creation. Luminous was one a few years back, Insignia and a couple others. It is, from our estimation, the propensity for the grant to be established under this new program would increase the opportunities for CHIPS Act applicants, more specifically because there is specific language in there related to potential CHIPS Act applicants and being scored more proficiently. So we're hopeful that that program gets put into our budget and finalized around the June timeframe, so that way we can start marketing that program in July. But at this point, we don't have any understanding of whether or not that program will actually happen. 100%. Sorry. Thank you.
There's a question, are any of the tax credits transferable? Can they be sold on the market in the case a company is running on a loss and may not be able to benefit from them?
Yeah, so the tax credits are not transferable and they're not saleable. So in this case, this is a big reason for our push for the grant program, especially for those who have really large net loss carryforwards and really large R&D exposure. We are hopeful that the grant does get additional traction because of that need, and knowing that the applications that would be requiring this kind of incentive are those that will be creating really good quality jobs in California. And so we're really hopeful that the legislature sees eye to eye with our reasoning and response behind that. Thank you.
There are a lot of questions about where to access these tools and resources. Perhaps kind of you can mention where how we can follow up.
Yeah, the main thing is reach out to us. Obviously, CalBiz at GO-Biz.ca.gov. We are here to help you navigate through all the challenging, and this is not your job, right? Your job is not to figure out what the incentives are. I mean, it may be your job now in relation to your applications, but on a day-to-day basis, you're focused on what your business needs and what you're trying to do. Use us as a resource, use us as assistance, and use us in a way that would expand the opportunities that you could see within this landscape. So first off, obviously, CalBiz at GoBiz.ca.gov. We have regional reps across the state who will work directly on your project. In addition to that, you can go to business.ca.gov/industry/chips for very basic understanding of some of these details. But again, project specificity and timeframes and how you guys are going about your business decisions is the most critical part. We are not in the business of trying to tell you what to do. We're really in the business of trying to assist you in getting the things you want to get done. And as the CHIPS Act is a tremendous opportunity for all of us, we want to make sure that you have the tools and the information necessary to make the best application possible. In that sense, too, we want to make sure that you're, one, looking out for your R&D tax credit. That is definitely usable. Two, look at any previous purchases or the purchases you already have. And then let's get connected on some of these other opportunities more specific to your project.
Thank you, Kaina. Question from Scott Miller. Does the state have programs that can provide cost share co-investment other than tax incentives or proposals, the 11 billion CHIPS R&D programs?
Now, when you say cost share or co-investment, the opportunities that we provide are mostly in the reduction of expense side or the reduction of utility costs or in the credits that are associated with hiring specific classifications of workers. There's not necessarily an opportunity for cost share currently. We've had the iBank program, which is the venture capital fund, started, and frankly, I don't know where they're at, whether they're ready to start making some of those investments at this point, but that is something I'll look into. And if there is suitable information to provide to the SEMI Foundation to disseminate to the members, we'll make sure that that gets to his hands, to Joe's hands as well. But at this time, I'm not aware of anything that we can do in terms of direct injections for specific applications, other than potentially the CalCompetes grant if we get it.
Kind of just in the sake of time, I'll offer two more questions.
Sure.
More generically, does California offer resources to help small businesses complete their proposals, be it reviewing, editing, gauging compliance? Other states have organizations that provide that support.
So in the state of California, we have a network of funded organizations through GO-Biz, which is the Small Business Development Centers. They are able to provide business planning and assistance related to those things. Our office is willing to look at anything and to see and offer any types of information from what we have. And we can offer some potential information and assistance in that vein. But yes, our Small Business Development Center network and various other regional center networks will be able to provide some of those services free of charge. And then should there be additional information that you need or additional assistance from our firm or our organization and agency, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you, Kaina. And last question, I think for the sake of time to wrap up, do you foresee grants funds being available to support curriculum development to provide future workforce to the semiconductor industry?
Well, I'll take the first crack at this, but I'd love to offer up Derek to answer a portion if he's willing. I am always willing to look at opportunities to plus up both the talent pool and the opportunities for that talent pool, regardless of what the situation is. However, I would say that more specifically, we are looking at active curriculum engagement through community colleges, Cal States, and UCs on specific types of job needs from the industry itself. So if you have a need, and one of the illustrations that Mike was trying to present in the show of San Diego was that your need could be understood, but there may be more of it. That's where we're going to help you. That's where we're going to want to connect you. That's where we're going to want to help try and navigate the opportunities within these frameworks and establish these good downstream talent acquisition pools for your firm. Derek, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I would say a significant portion of the intent for the High Road Training Partnership Funds is the planning exercise and the training development, like training curriculum development exercises. Those funding are historically not intended for curriculum development through the university system. It's more the technical trade side, still critically important, I think, to this conversation. But I think what would be really interesting is a unique partnership and opportunity, as the CHIPS program office has asked for universities and higher education institutions to partner with the workforce systems to consider what might the full scope of career pathway be in that type of a planning exercise. And so I believe that SEMI has had some conversations with the Workforce Development Board. And I think that there are some real opportunities to really, as coalitions, consider what this is, recognizing that each of your companies might have different processes, but that there are some really core foundational components that we could consider in the development of that curriculum.
Derek, if I may, this is Joe. SEMI is very active in this area, and we have formed a coalition. The name of it is the American Semiconductor Academy, and we are partnering with over 200 universities and community colleges, and we are looking at, through this, working to meet the talent needs from the associate degree, which is where we see an awful lot of really nice opportunities for technicians. We can never get enough technicians in our fabs and in our equipment and materials, and the entire supply chain can never get enough technicians. And it goes right through to the PhD programs that are really focusing on the most advanced technologies. In addition to this, we have some VETS programs that we're also aligning, which is another great source of resources with over 200,000 folks processing out of our military after providing military service to our country. So this is, again, another program where SEMI's working to try and help meet the needs. That said, it is the #1 challenge for our member companies, is finding the talent. Folks are concerned about being able to find the talent that will not limit their growth, but actually allow them to grow at the rates that are available to them.
Thank you, Joe. I just want to, before throwing it to kind of for that wrap up, I know we had a lot of questions about where we can access these links or a follow-up. We'll work with SEMI to throw all of this information out. If you ever want a reiteration of any of this, please contact us. If you ever want us to speak to any of your collaboratives on these tools or these programs, contact us. We're happy to do it. Yeah, we want to be a resource. So with that, I'll throw to Kaina and Joe for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you all for joining us today. I know that there was a ton of information that we shared, but I think the most important and most critical piece of information is this. Please get in contact with us regardless of the timing of your application at calbiz@gobiz.ca.gov. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Kaina. Just one last comment to finish up. We had a number of questions on information. Everyone who registered for this webinar will receive an email with a link that allows them to get at the slides, which include a lot of the contact information you presented today. So it will be available to folks in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you again to SEMI. Thank you, Joe. Very much so. Thank you to our companies. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.